welcome to this Astranti video. Now in this video today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be providing you with a little bit of a sample of some of our OCS PreScene analysis for the May and August 2020 sittings. Now the extract that I've got for you today is a little bit of an extra analysing the role that you fulfill within our PreScene company ChargeIT. Now understanding this role is crucial in terms of understanding the requirements that you'll face in the OCS exam itself. So it's really important that you get to grips with this part of the PreScene and understand it in full. Okay, so without any further ado, let's jump over to this PreScene video excerpt and learn a little bit more about your role within ChargeIT in a little bit more detail. The first thing straight away to say here is to reinforce the importance of this section of the PreScene. Now on the surface of things, the first time you viewed this PreScene document, you might have had a quick glance over this section, as on the surface it seems quite small, quite inconsequential, a sort of introductory bit of blurb for you before you get into the meat of the PreScene company itself. Okay, so if you have, as part of your initial revision, just flicked over this section, I would urge you to pause, rewind a little bit and look at the content within this section in a little bit more detail. Okay, so this section contains a range of key information, and understanding this is absolutely vital to your success in this case study exam. So a crucial part of your success at operational case study level is to realise that what's being tested in this exam is not just your knowledge of the relevant accounting theories from F1, from E1, from P1. What is also being tested is your ability to apply these theories to real-world scenarios and real-world examples. Okay, and the way in which this application is tested is by making you take on the role of an employee within the PreScene company during the exam, i.e. having you respond to everyday scenarios that a real-life accountant would do within the workplace. And with this idea in mind, this section of the PreScene should increase in importance in your mind. Essentially by setting out the role that you are fulfilling as an employee within ChargeIT as a business, this section is essentially setting out the responsibilities that you will be expected to fulfill, and therefore the areas in which and about which you will be tested in the actual exam itself. Okay, and because this section is so crucial in setting out the areas, the ways in which you will be tested in your exam, it's worth us taking a few minutes to break down these few sentences in a little bit more detail, in line with what we know about the exam itself. Okay, so the first thing that we can spell out and break down in a bit more detail is that you are a finance officer for ChargeIT. Okay, but the question we have to ask here is, what role does a finance officer actually fulfill for a business like ChargeIT, and what position is an employee of this level within the company as a whole? Well, as you can see from the generic organisational structure on screen at the moment, as a finance officer, you are essentially at the lowest level, the lowest rung of the organisational hierarchy. Okay, so as a finance officer, you operate within the finance department of a business like ChargeIT, and you may be one of several different employees of the same job title, of the same level, operating at this lowest level of the organisational hierarchy. Okay, and then in terms of the hierarchy within this organisation, you and any other finance officers that ChargeIT employs, will report directly to the company's finance manager, i.e. the next staff member up the hierarchical ladder, who in turn will then report to the company's finance director, responsible for overseeing the entirety of the company's financial operations, who in turn will then report to the managing director or CEO of the business as a whole. Okay, so you may be thinking this is all well and good, but what relevance does this have to me and my passing of this operational case study exam? Well, essentially understanding the place that a finance officer sits within an organisational hierarchy is crucial to understanding the level of tasks that you will face within this role in your exam. So as a finance officer operating at the lowest level of this organizational hierarchy, your focus is going to be on the operational side of things. So you're going to be dealing with operational information, and what this means is you're going to be producing things such as financial accounting information, management accounting information, and maybe other information. And then you'll likely be conducting a level of analysis on this information that you have produced or compiled. Now, the crucial thing to be aware of here is that the information that you produce, the analysis that you undertake, will be short-term in its focus. What essentially you will be doing is you'll be producing information, conducting analysis that will be used by those higher up the organization's food chain, so at strategic and tactical levels, to make longer term decisions about the development of the business and its strategy. Okay, so by understanding the role and the sort of tasks that a real-life finance officer would have to undertake in a business of this nature, essentially what we're doing is we're identifying the number or the type of tasks, that you'll be asked to undertake in this exam. Okay, so we've set out or addressed the level of responsibility that you will have to take on as a finance officer within this business. Now let's break down this statement on screen in a little bit more detail to specifically relate it back to the requirements you'll face in your exam and the sort of tasks you'll be asked to perform. Okay, so let's start with this first phrase here, compile information. What does this actually mean in the context of your exam? Okay, essentially, so in the context of your exam, the ability to compile information is your opportunity to demonstrate the accounting knowledge that you have accrued over the course of your CIMA studies so far. Okay, so here we're talking about, can you demonstrate your financial accounting knowledge from F1? Can you demonstrate your management accounting knowledge from P1? And can you demonstrate your wider business knowledge that you've acquired over the course of your E1 studies? Unfortunately, as we've touched on earlier, the key to success at operational case study level is not just regurgitating all of the OT knowledge that you have learned previously. What we are more looking for at operational level is an application of your existing technical knowledge to the real life scenarios that you'll come up against as a finance officer working for ChargeIT. Okay, so this is where the second part of this statement comes in, provide analysis. Okay, so in the actual exam itself, you're presented with a range of real-life scenarios. And what you're going to have to do is firstly demonstrate your accounting knowledge that's relevant to the particular scenario. But then secondly and crucially, you're going to have to apply this knowledge in a more practical sense as if you were a real-life employee. And if we think about this idea in terms of the wider context about what CIMA wants to achieve by putting you through exams of this nature, if you are an actual finance officer within an actual business, you would come across a range of scenarios on a day-to-day basis that would require you to apply your accounting knowledge. Now, these scenarios wouldn't just require you to regurgitate a particular piece of theory. What they would require you to do is recall that piece of theory and then apply it, act on it in relation to the specific scenario that you are dealing with. Okay, and the concept in these exams is exactly the same, just applied to a fictional scenario. Okay, moving on to the final part of this statement on screen, providing analysis for strategic decision making. Well, here we're just reinforcing some of the points we talked about earlier. As a finance officer, you're not going to be making key decisions in relation to a business's strategy. What instead you are going to be doing is conducting a level of lower level, shorter term analysis, which is then used by people who higher up the organizational food chain. So maybe the finance director, maybe the company's managing director, to make these strategic decisions about a business's future. So in the context of your exam, if you are asked to provide a recommendation or a justification for a decision as part of your answer, it's important to remember that this should have more of a short-term focus and shouldn't focus on the overall strategy and direction of a business. So now that we've clarified your role as a finance officer, let's look at the remainder of this role outline. So your main role within the business is to support Sophie Jacobs, who is ChargeIT's finance manager. And we can see how this fits very nicely with the organizational structure that we've set out underneath the paragraph here. And as a finance officer, your tasks include the preparation of the company's annual budget, the production of its monthly management accounts, and the provision of information to management as and when is required. So let's pause the video here and let's break down this last sentence in a little bit more detail. Okay, so if you think about these statements in relation to the syllabus content for the operational case study exam, we are dealing straight away here with a lot of management accounting content. And if we think about this in terms of the 3 syllabuses, we are of course here focusing straight away on the P1 syllabus. Okay, so unfortunately, unlike the 2015 syllabus, where we could confidently say that P1 questions would constitute 50% of your exam, we can't make such clear-cut predictions about the percentage of content that you'll face that will relate to this particular syllabus for the new 2019 exams. What we can do, however, is focus on the 6 key learning outcomes or core activities upon which you'll be tested in this exam, and use these as a basis to get more of a rough estimate about the amount of content that you will likely face from the different syllabuses. So these core activities come with weighting ranges attached to them. Okay, so core activity A, which is in relation to the preparation of costing information, will account for between 12 and 18% of your exam, while core activity B, which represents or which covers, the preparation of budgeting information, will represent between 17 and 25% of your exam. Okay, so what we have here are 2 core activities that could form up to 43% of the content in your exam, which focus exclusively on 2 of the key topics within the P1 syllabus in terms of budgeting and costing. What this then reinforces, of course, is the importance as part of your revision for this exam of brushing up on the key theoretical content that forms part of this P1 syllabus. Okay, so here we're talking about things like costing and budgeting, but also here we're talking about things like variance analysis. Okay. These topics form a key part of the P1 syllabus, and as we've just seen, form a dominant part of the weighting in terms of the content that you will likely be tested upon in your exam. So there is no excuses for not brushing up your knowledge on these subject areas, as we can guarantee that this knowledge will be tested in your exam. The second part of this sentence is also worth us taking a little bit of time to address. So the provision of information to management as required. I think what we're looking at here is essentially a little bit of a coverall basis statement by CIMA. CIMA obviously need to be able to test you across the breadth of their operational syllabuses. So here, this sentence is essentially providing them with the option to test you on your E1 based content, but also maybe some of the other aspects of the P1 syllabus that are not covered in the first half of this sentence. So when thinking back to our 6 key learning outcomes C is centered around the analysis of performance using financial and non-financial information, and this accounts for between 17 and 25% of your exam. While key learning outcome E centers around the preparation of information to support short-term decision making, and again, this accounts for between 75 and 25% of your exam. Okay, so what we have here are a couple of learning outcomes that maybe aren't as specifically focused on central P1 theory as learning outcomes A and B. But what we do have here are more general core activities that allow CIMA to test you on a variety of different topics from both the P1 and the E1 syllabuses. Okay, so these 2 key learning outcomes reinforce once again the dominance that P1 has within this exam, so reinforces to you the importance of brushing up on theory throughout the breadth of this syllabus. Okay, but it also highlights the importance of brushing up on your theory from the E1 syllabus. While E1 may not be as explicitly referenced in these key learning outcomes as P1 and F1, what is evident is that it is subtly referenced throughout many of these different activities. And content from this syllabus may therefore form a dominant part of a question which accounts for up to 25% of your exam. And it's vital therefore that you don't overlook this content and have an awareness that it will feature in some manner within your exam. Okay, so finishing off this statement, and a little bit more clearly, a little bit more explicitly, your role also involves assisting with the preparation of the financial statements of this company, and also dealing with any queries that are raised with regards to financial reporting. Okay, so this statement here covers the last two of our core activities, okay? So core activity D relates to the application of relevant financial reporting standards, corporate governance, ethical and taxation principles. Okay, so we can quite clearly see this statement catered for in your role outline on screen here, and up to 18% of your exam could therefore be dealing with specific financial accounting queries, ranging from anything from dealing with a specific accounting standard all the way through to a specific question on something like tax. The last of these 6 key learning outcomes then relates to another area of the F1 syllabus, which is in relation to the management of a company's working capital. So here we have a very specific key learning outcome on a very specific topic within the F1 syllabus. So you clearly have financial accounting responsibilities as part of your role, and this is combined with the explicit reference to working capital as its own core activity within the new CIMA syllabus. So what this clearly references to us is that working capital is a topic that will come up in some way, in some form, as part of your exam. So another key area to be aware of and prepare for as part of your revision. Before we move on to the next section of this video, the final thing I would say here is that if you are still unfamiliar with how this new exam is marked, if you're unfamiliar with the sort of things that constitute these 6 key outcomes or core activities, then we do have a separate study text which contains all that sort of more practical detail about the exam. Okay, so if you are still struggling with some of those aspects, please do take the time to read the study text and familiarize yourself with these new ideas, as I won't be going over them in detail in these particular videos. Okay, so I hope you found that little snippet of PreScene video 1 in our PreScene analysis series really helpful. If you liked what you've heard and you'd like to get a little bit more detail, a little bit more information on the PreScene company, then why not head over to the ChargeIT website where you can purchase the PreScene video analysis series in full, as well as a range of other great materials in relation to the May and August operational case study exam sittings.